sanitizing equipment, including the spray booth phenomenon on the market, and how to distinguish the one from the other.
Hi, good morning. Thank you and welcome everybody.
Right, so Kobus, let me start by asking you, who are you? Who is Kobus van Zyl?
Most of the people will know me for manufacturing mining equipment. Obviously, we've got the engineering shop. We've got access to the manufacturing facilities, and we have our own brand of pumps. And from this need that developed out of the virus, and obviously we all want to start getting back to work, we basically engineered a spray booth that will make sure we will cover all needs. And basically the business, whoever gets the people to work, that will allow him to do this in a safe manner, to make sure he doesn't create a new hub for the stuff to breathe. And we were very decisive on the way to clean these people getting to work. And then obviously there's a few mechanisms that we will tie up with the unit that we designed to also make sure whenever somebody leaves work, you also ensure as the employer that these people go back home safe and clean, so that nobody can point a finger at you. So we were very specific to reach this goal, and that is why you will see our design have a few changes. And then obviously with the implementation of all these things, we made sure that this is very safe, that we're not creating a new bomb or a new problem, and to make this easy on everybody.
So something you say, Kobus, something you say that I think is very, very funny, and I know you don't mean it funny, but just the way you say it, I have to say is very funny. Kobus talks about things going poof. And ladies and gentlemen, I think that you can all imagine that the last thing you want is for your sanitizing chamber to go poof, because poof is not good. Poof is very bad. Poof means that the thing will blow up if it's not properly structured. It means that the thing might very well blow your guests, your customers, even your employees to smithereens. And that is not a good thing to have on the record of your business. So the bottom line is, I think that everything that Kobus is about things not going poof. Kobus, but before we talk about your various ranges, let's talk about some of the basics which relate to this kind of equipment, the kinds of distinctions between the various products on the marketplace, and the good and the bad of those distinctions. If I can, please ask you to address that for us.
Good. So basically, the point is to get the people sanitized getting to your workplace, and we can't spray stuff, any stuff on them, and they risk catching a cold. So designing this whole thing was basically based on the principle to do this as short as possible, but as effective as possible. So we covered all areas, and you will also see the spray booth was designed in such a way that you cover from the top all the areas and the feet at the bottom. The person that's going through here, where a lot of people make the mistake, they see you as a flat surface just going through like this, and then you just get sprayed with nozzles from the side. And that was our first concern when we see obviously alternative units in the market. From the start, we designed to ensure, because we are a round object, to spray them 45 degrees from the sides with the different nozzles. And that makes sure, that enables us to allow this person to go through as quickly as possible. We need 5 seconds direct contact to get as much as possible fluid on the person, to ensure we get a very effective 30 seconds contact period for this, whatever fluid we put in there, to kill the germs that is on the clothes of the people.
So Kobus, I just want to come back to emphasize a couple of things that you've raised. And then also, I've got a question from Francois I want us to address right at the very beginning. But let's emphasize this, that in terms of sanitizer considerations, number one, there is obviously the issue of safety. All right. And we'll talk a little bit about that in a second. There's obviously the issue of safety we have to deal with. Number two, we want to talk specifically about, I'm going to say, and I know you think it's very simplistic when I use this term, but I want to talk about nozzles. Number 3, I want to talk about 3D, the notion of 3D. And number 4, I want to talk about time, and essentially what you've spoken about being 5 seconds. Okay, so let's just go through those things that you have alluded to, but I want to emphasize. So the first thing is safety. How do you know if a sanitizer machine is going to be safe or not?
There's effective. There is the effective first. The effective is to get as maximum product onto the person as quickly as possible, and to make sure you don't drip dry when you go through like a chicken just getting out of a rainstorm. Yeah, then that is also a risk. Obviously, the people will catch a cold, and they will. There's a risk to get a flu or something else. All right, so that is the main principle here, is to get this going, the people through the system as quickly as possible. Then safety. There's a lot of pumps that were implemented and installed that does not comply to the IP65 standard, where we are working with alcohol. So obviously, if the bearing seizes on the pump and creates a spark, this thing will go boom. That's not something that you will see, but that's something that we need to make sure from our side. Anybody, that must be a specific rule, safety minimum requirements to make sure the pumps are IP65 standard. All electronics used in here, IP65 standard. So that is something that you won't visibly see, but we have to make sure we install it that way.
How do I know?
So that's the one thing.
How do I know, Kobus, when I buy one of these pumps from you, for example, how do I know that your equipment is IP65 friendly?
We get certification we issue with our system. So everything that we buy has certificates to prove that it is IP65 standard.
Okay, so I just want to just summarize what you've just said. So first of all, you're saying the first thing is the effectiveness, and that really is, you've alluded there to the fact that you want the shortest period of time for a person to be exposed to the sanitizer in a booth like this, number 1. Number 2, you also want to make sure that it's the widest possible coverage of their entire body without them necessarily having to turn around, what I refer to as 3D. And you're really saying total coverage. So that's the effectiveness. What I
want to stretch there.
Yes.
Ivor, if you do a single plated nozzle system from the sides and you don't do the angle thing, then you create a scenario where a person must go in, close his eyes, because they are most probably scared of the sanitizer that will get into their eyes. So they go and they need to turn around 360 basically in an area where you basically ask them to close their eyes. And that's creating, it's another hazard to the system if you go the normal parallel. So the idea is to go in, stand up straight, just lift your armpits, because that's the only place that the machine doesn't cover. And there you go, your 5 seconds are finished. If you do the straight on blasting from the sides, doesn't matter how many nozzles, then you have to turn. You have to turn to get both sides, especially the front and the back. And that is the main concern here with this stuff that is not designed right. All right.
Something again, in terms of safety. So we know that from what you've said about safety, the machine, the equipment itself needs to have an IP65 kind of a rating. But I think what's also very, very important for me to ask you about is that as far as the sanitizing product itself is concerned, and we have had a couple of questions here about the sanitizing product itself, but as far as the sanitizing product itself is concerned, how do we know that, number 1, it's effective, and you use the term effective, and number 2, how do we know that it's safe?
All right. To get back, all the mines approved the 70% alcohol sanitizer that has the quickest time to kill basically the germs, whatever is on you, the viruses. Now, if you go and reduce the 70% alcohol down to a 30, you can do that. You can mix this, and this is very important. When the moment people start playing around mixing this to make it cheaper, then they will create a problem, because we will then miss the whole point here. So first of all, 70% sanitizer, that is currently the best in the market. There's a lot of people that say, yeah, but there will be people that is sensitive to alcohol. Yes, it is a fact. That is currently below 3%, roughly the information that we can get so far. But there is people that is designing and testing currently to see how we can change this. Unfortunately, it's not something that we're available on the shelf that we can just put in. There are currently sanitizers available, but you can see specifically on the labels, they say to you, you need 60 seconds time on hand. And imagine if you stand in these things for 60 seconds compared to a 5 seconds, you drip dry when you go out of these. And that is the problem. So we are really trying to get the time as short as possible, but it must still stay effective.
So I want to, something you've told me about previously that I thought was absolutely fascinating, and I didn't think about it even though it's absolutely logical. And that is this, that irrespective of what sanitizing equipment a company buys, they've got to impress upon their staff and their customers and their clients the fact that they have to be wearing the clothing that is going to be used inside the shop, inside the factory, inside the facility. There's no use in wearing your overcoat, having that sanitized as you walk through this equipment, and then taking that overcoat off inside, because then, in fact, you've neutralized the full effect of the sanitizing process. I found that
Yes.
absolutely fascinating.
Yes, we have obviously different scenarios now where you've got a workshop with overalls. We have to make sure if that person arrives at your premises and there's a change house or something like that, that there's another machine for those clothes also available. So there's definitely internal spray booths needed as well if there's any change of clothes. And it's very simple. You can't go and sit topless or without a jacket there at a place and you were sprayed now with 5 jerseys on and a rain jacket and all these things. It doesn't help at all. So we need to be very clear when we write the SOPs on this matter. We need to make sure that people understand the whole function of this. And if you go do shopping, you need to wear the clothes. You can't now undress on the inside. You need to wear the clothes that you are going to wear the whole process of being in this building, because that is a possible breathing space for these germs, and we need to make sure we don't do that. So it's very simple. And then obviously later on we will discuss a little bit about the masks, but it is absolutely imperative that we use the mask. We have to keep on using the mask. It must stay on. If we miss this point, we are creating a hub where the germs will breed and you will get into lockdown very, very soon. And obviously then they close you for a while.
Okay. One of the other things you mentioned that I did want to emphasize is you've told me previously that unless there are 12 or more nozzles on a sanitizing machine system, then in fact it is not effective. It is not going to cover every area of the entire body of all of the clothing as it is required.
Definitely. And what you also must understand, it's about the time period for people. You can just work on 5 seconds contact time with the alcohol that you need. It takes about 2.5 seconds to go in and out. So roughly every second, 7 to 8 seconds, somebody can go through this unit. Imagine if there's 1,700 people going to a mall or to a shift in the morning, then you need a lot of these booths. And if you use a sanitizer that needs a longer contact time, then you actually increase the time that the people will stand there in a row, like 2-3 hours, it's ridiculous. We can't do that. We can't allow that. So that is why we got to the 12 nozzles. You can perhaps get away with 10 when you open them up a little bit, but the best currently is 12. If you don't use the 12, you can also sanitize yourself, but then you need to stay there longer and turn yourself around, and that is creating, obviously it's a hazard. Asking people to close your eyes and turn around, you know, these people are not used to this, and it's old people perhaps, and imagine a wheelchair must now sit there and turn around in a small little booth, and that there's not enough space. Now, if you create space for these people, obviously there's a negative thing to that as well. If you make the booth too big, then the nozzles can't reach the person, so you can't get all the fluids to the relevant space that you want to get it. So it's not that effective, and that is why we got to this space of 1.2 meters to allow enough access, but also make sure the stuff gets onto the body as quickly and as effective as possible.
So Kobus, there are two questions. In fact, there are three questions that I want to address to you coming from our listeners, or from our viewers. The first is this. What is the effect on clothing? And I think what people are asking is, am I likely to come out, as you say, drip dried or drip drying, to the extent that my clothing gets ruined in the process from overexposure to sanitizing liquid?
If you use not the alcohol-based one, you obviously need to stay longer there. So yes, there will be more water on you, and it works out to you can end up with about 300 to 400 milliliters of water if you use not the alcohol-based sanitizer, and that's a lot of water. You can imagine half a liter of water sprayed over you. So we try to get away from that, and the time to make it as short as possible is important.
Okay, and I think interesting from what you said as well, that any part of your body that's exposed, for example, your underarms, etc., you should try and make sure in those 5 seconds that you're lifting your arms so that you are exposing any area of your body that can potentially be carrying the virus to the sanitizing effect. So that's critically important. The next question, which I think is a very, very important question, and that is from Mandy, who says, what about people with disabilities who make use of mobility devices, for example, wheelchairs? Are your spray booths wide enough to accommodate them?
Yes, this is why we got the nozzle spraying at a 45 degree from the front and from the back. So basically it covers you all, and from the top. The only area that may be a risk for guys in a wheelchair, they must just understand, obviously they can't lift their feet. So there is a small risk for them under the wheelchair, putting their feet on those little support mechanisms that obviously we can't, that is a problem. So
okay.
The same with the guy sitting in the chair. That is a risk. So we must understand the risk. And this is now, again, if the guy got out of his car and he was exposed to a certain level, sitting in this chair for the rest of the day, it can be fine, but we must understand the risk. It's like taking off your clothes or put on more clothes. We must be very strict on these things.
Okay, fair enough. And then the final question of these questions is, should these spray booths not be at the entrance of the shopping centers? Most shops cannot accommodate a booth. Now, I know you've worked quite hard on that, Kobus, and you've actually redesigned your spray booths to accommodate small retail shops as well. But the principle of the question, I think, is an important question, and that is, should every shopping center not automatically have to invest? Should every factory, should every manufacturing plant that has hundreds of people going through it, or at least 10 or 20 or 30 people going through it at any moment in time, should these things not be institutional rather than on a tenant by tenant basis, if I can put it that way?
I fully agree, but obviously you will get your smaller shops that is in the street which can't go and do this big booth. So we have to make alternative arrangements for them, which we designed, and it is possible. So yes, there are smaller units available. Just understand, with a smaller unit, you can get away with less nozzles, but then you create that scenario where the person needs to turn around. As long as everybody understands that, the risk and everything that you need to manage around that, it is possible to get it way cheaper. And yeah, if you have a lot of people flowing through a shop, like a small grocery shop which is not the mall, then I will still come back to this big sanitizer where you can go in and out through the same system.
I want to go to something you told me as well previously, and that was that a 25-liter drum of sanitizer, well, rather a liter of sanitizer, is able to sanitize. How many people did you say?
You can use for 1 liter, you can spray 20 people roughly.
So for 1 liter,
So
you can spray 20 people. You can have 25-second sprays of people for 1 liter. So in terms of the consumables, your calculation there needs to be done on a 1 to 20 basis for the kind of volumes you're going to need to have on site to be able to be effective with your customer, your client, or your employee base.
yes, obviously that comes down to about R2.50 per person. But what we also need to understand, if you go and reduce the alcohol content now in this sanitizer to a 30, then you need about 2.5 times more sanitizer to be sprayed on the person to have the same effect. And obviously you need like 3-4 containers. So it becomes a logistical nightmare if you reduce the alcohol. So yes, the alcohol, there's a risk for people that may not like it and that are sensitive to alcohol. But then if you go to the sanitizers not with alcohol, then you've got the chemical compound that may irritate your skin again. And with a lot of exposure to those, then the irritation can be worse than the alcohol. So there are people that will pass out with alcohol spray, but for those, you close your nose, you close your eyes with a mask. If you use a proper mask, and this is now again where people need to be sensitive, and we can address this a little bit later, but there are different masks, and some of the masks will not allow the sanitizer to come through the mask and that you can inhale it.
Could we address the issue of the masks now, because we are going to run out of time? So
Yes.
let's address the issue of the masks now.
We basically a lot of people don't understand what the layers or inside of the mask is helping you with. Now there is a normal public one. There is that is the one where you can walk around in the street. You get a 85% roughly allowance, where there's 15% that can come through. There's a 95, which we call a medical, that you will typically use. That is the guard at this gate, for instance, or at the mall measuring your temperature. He will use a medical mask. The public one is for the individual walking around, sitting in the office, where there's not a lot of people close to you. Then when you go to the surgical mask, that is the one that you need for doctors operating, the people working with the dead bodies, and so on. So that's the 99% one. And that is normally where people refer to as the N95. But there is a lot of tricks here. There's a KA95 also, which will also have a very good up to 6 layers of material on the inside. So you get a 3-layer, 4, 5, 6, and yeah, it's very technical. But you can get stuff that will keep all germs out, all alcohol out. You will not breathe it in. So there are safe ways to get through. 85, a public, will protect you through this. You will not inhale this as long as there's no open spaces here at the top or on the sides, and it will be safe to walk through the sanitizer. But a sock will not help you, please. A sock or a jockey, I see there's a lot of videos, it will not help you. So material will not help you. It doesn't. It just keeps your nose out of your finger out of your nose. That's all a cloth mask does. And big particles, but it doesn't keep the virus out. It
Okay.
doesn't keep alcohol out.
Look, I mean, I'm inclined to walk through without a mask with a cherry and a piece of lemon in my mouth. I mean, it's 70% alcohol, but nevertheless, that's just me.
Yes.
All right. So Kobus, we are running out of time, and I do want to get on to our next presenter. But can I ask you this then? The additional equipment that you certainly are focusing on as the standard of equipment, the kind of stuff that certainly medium to large size companies would need, sort of is around the thermometer area. either something like is on the screen at the moment in terms of group thermo readings, or alternate, and I would imagine that's for large groups, for large factories, for large workplaces, as opposed to for handheld thermometers. But are there
Yeah.
standards which are acceptable in terms of government application and government requirements here in South Africa?
Yeah, the minimum is currently, as long as you don't touch, it's okay, so that you can't spread it in a way. So as long as you buy something that can measure 3 to 4 centimeters away from a head, that is okay, it's safe. And I believe that should be the way that we think around this, and the way we use to, when we do the buying of these things. And then obviously the one at the top is the group one, where you could identify somebody, like in the mornings at a school or in at the workplace, where you can see if there's somebody, even if you walk with coffee in your hand, it will pick up the coffee, the heat there, and it will flag immediately there's something wrong there. So we've got people, they are here in the group, they are busy doing that addition to the current booth that we have, and it will be available very soon. And it's actually great, these things. It's a little camera that you install. You can get the tripod that stands alone, but these things, you can monitor them at a control center, a centralized control center, maybe in your workplace, maybe at a place somewhere in Joburg. So it's all possible. These things is, you just install it. There's no need to buy the booth, or it's working as an individual unit, but we would obviously like to add it to our whole unit, hanging it in there, where you can also add face recognition for access control. You can counter people going in and out through the system. You can even do the palms reader in there. So there's a lot of opportunities here to cut out a lot of things here when you install this.
Okay, fantastic. Kobus, how do people find you? And we are obviously going to circulate your details, but NMS is your organization. You will give us the contact details for your organization, the full range of what you have available in terms of masks, in terms of the group thermo readings, the individual thermo readings, and importantly, in terms of your sanitization equipment, the fact that you have small equipment as well as large equipment. I do know for a fact that you have had a number of orders from Department of Trade and Industry itself. You've had a number of orders from a number of mines around the country. Your equipment is in very good use out there. And I also know that you're finding out more and more and more about the application, both of your sanitizer as well as the standard operating process for your equipment. I know, for example, that you've worked with our next guest on a standard, on an actual standard for sanitizing spray booths and equipment.
Yes.
That she will undoubtedly be referring to. So thank you for being on this webinar with us. I'm sorry to keep cutting you short like this, but we will obviously bring you then to the attention of our listeners on our various groups as well as via email newsletters. Thank you, Kobus. Thanks for giving us the time.
It's a pleasure, and the website is typed in there. Thank you.
Fantastic.